This happens because the fruit expands faster than the skin can stretch. Stable moisture levels help prevent these sudden growth surges, producing smoother, healthier tomatoes that look just as good as they taste. As we continue through this guide, you'll discover several more June mistakes that can quietly reduce your harvest. Some affect fruit production, others increase disease pressure, and one of them can destroy an entire plant surprisingly fast. But if you master this first principle, consistent deep watering, you'll already be giving your tomatoes one of the greatest advantages possible. Strong roots, stable growth, healthier fruit, and fewer problems all begin with the way you water. And that foundation will make every other improvement far more effective as the season moves forward. Now that we've covered the importance of consistent watering, let's move to another mistake that catches countless gardeners every summer. The frustrating part is that this mistake often makes your tomato plants look incredibly healthy at first. In fact, your neighbors might even compliment them. The leaves are deep green, the stems are thick, and the plants seem to be growing faster than ever. But when harvest time arrives, something feels wrong. You have a giant tomato plant covered in foliage and surprisingly few tomatoes. If that sounds familiar, there's a good chance you're feeding your tomatoes too much nitrogen. Nitrogen is an essential nutrient, especially during the early stages of growth. It helps build strong stems and lush green leaves. However, many gardeners continue feeding high nitrogen fertilizers throughout the entire season without realizing that what helped the plant grow early on can actually reduce fruit production later. When excess nitrogen is available, the plant receives a constant signal to focus on producing more leaves and stems instead of flowers and fruit. The result is a beautiful-looking plant that spends all its energy growing bigger rather than producing the harvest you're waiting for. Think about it this way. A tomato plant has limited energy available. Every day it must decide where that energy goes. If nitrogen levels remain high, the plant keeps investing in foliage because that's what the nutrient balance encourages. Flower production slows, fruit development gets delayed, and sometimes blossoms drop before they ever have a chance to become tomatoes. Many gardeners mistakenly respond by adding even more fertilizer, creating a cycle that only makes the problem worse. The solution is surprisingly simple. Once your tomato plants begin flowering and setting fruit, shift your focus away from heavy nitrogen feeding and toward balanced nutrition that supports blooming and fruit development. Tomato-specific fertilizers are usually formulated with this goal in mind. They provide nutrients that encourage flowering, fruit size, and overall productivity without pushing excessive leafy growth. Compost is another excellent option because it releases nutrients gradually and helps build healthy soil without overwhelming the plant. Remember, bigger plants do not always mean bigger harvests. A moderately sized plant loaded with tomatoes will always outperform a giant leafy plant that spends the entire summer producing greenery. The goal is not maximum growth. The goal is maximum production. Now let's move on to one of the most damaging mistakes a gardener can make in June. This is the mistake that often starts with good intentions. After a long, hot day, you walk into the garden and see your tomatoes looking tired from the heat. Wanting to help, you grab the hose and spray the entire plant from top to bottom. The leaves get soaked, the stems get soaked, and the soil gets watered at the same time. Feels refreshing. Feels caring. Unfortunately, it can also create the perfect environment for serious disease. Tomato plants are vulnerable to several fungal and moisture-related diseases that thrive when leaves stay wet for extended periods. Many disease spores already exist in garden soil or on old plant debris left behind from previous seasons. When water splashes upward from the soil or falls directly onto the foliage, those spores can easily land on healthy leaves. Once there, they only need one thing to begin causing trouble: moisture. Wet leaves provide exactly the conditions many diseases need to spread. Evening watering makes the situation even worse because the moisture remains on the plant all night long. Instead of drying quickly under sunlight, the leaves stay damp for hours. That long period of darkness and moisture creates an ideal environment for infection. What begins as a few small spots on lower leaves can gradually spread through the entire plant if conditions remain favorable.
This is why experienced gardeners often avoid overhead watering whenever possible. Instead, they focus on delivering water directly to the soil around the base of the plant. Soaker hoses and drip irrigation systems are especially effective because they keep moisture where it belongs, in the root zone, while leaving the foliage dry. Even if you water by hand, aiming the water at the soil instead of the leaves can dramatically reduce disease pressure throughout the season. Timing matters too. Morning watering is far safer than evening watering. When plants receive water early in the day, any accidental splashes on leaves have time to dry quickly in the sunlight. This simple adjustment can significantly reduce the likelihood of fungal problems developing later. Combined with proper watering techniques, it becomes one of the easiest ways to protect your tomatoes during the most challenging part of summer. Another helpful step is removing the lowest leaves that sit close to the soil. These leaves are often the first to become infected because they receive the most splashback during rainstorms and watering. Creating a little extra space between the soil surface and the lowest foliage improves airflow and reduces opportunities for disease to establish itself. Pair that with a layer of mulch, and you create an additional barrier that helps keep soil-borne pathogens from reaching the plant. The biggest lesson here is that good intentions aren't always enough. Many gardeners lose plants not because they neglect them, but because they unknowingly create conditions that favor disease. By feeding wisely and watering correctly, you eliminate two of the most common problems that hold tomato plants back. And as you'll see in the next section, there are still a couple more June mistakes that can quietly sabotage an otherwise promising harvest. Now let's talk about a mistake that seems harmless but can quietly create problems all season long. Many gardeners believe the best thing they can do is simply leave their tomato plants alone and let nature take over. While that sounds reasonable, it can actually work against you when growing indeterminate tomatoes, the tall, vining varieties that continue growing and producing fruit throughout the season. These plants constantly produce new side shoots, often called suckers, which emerge between the main stem and branches. At first, they seem insignificant, but if left unchecked, every sucker eventually becomes another large stem competing for sunlight, nutrients, and energy. Before long, the plant becomes a tangled mass of foliage with poor airflow and excessive humidity trapped deep inside the canopy. That dense growth creates exactly the conditions many tomato diseases love. After rain, watering, or even heavy morning dew, moisture lingers much longer inside a crowded plant. Leaves stay wet, air circulation decreases, and disease pressure increases dramatically. At the same time, the plant spends enormous amounts of energy supporting extra stems and leaves instead of focusing on fruit production. This is why strategic pruning can be so beneficial. Removing small suckers while they're still young helps open the plant, improves airflow, and redirects energy toward developing tomatoes rather than endless leafy growth. Fortunately, pruning doesn't have to be complicated. Once a week, take a few minutes to inspect your plants. If you see small suckers beginning to form between branches and the main stem, simply pinch them off with your fingers. The process takes only moments but can make a noticeable difference as the season progresses. However, moderation is important. Overpruning creates a different problem. Tomato leaves are not just decoration. They protect fruit from intense summer sun. Remove too many leaves, and exposed tomatoes can suffer sunscald, developing pale, damaged patches that reduce quality and invite decay. The goal is balance. Enough pruning to improve airflow, but enough foliage to shield fruit from extreme heat. And speaking of heat, that brings us to the fifth and final mistake, a problem that confuses even experienced gardeners every summer. Imagine your tomato plants are healthy, green, well-watered, and free of disease. Everything appears perfect. Then suddenly, flowers begin dropping off the plant without producing fruit. Tiny yellow blossoms dry up and fall to the ground. Naturally, many gardeners assume they've done something wrong. They add more fertilizer. They water more frequently. They search for pests. Yet nothing changes. The flowers continue falling, and no new tomatoes appear.
The surprising truth is that the problem often has nothing to do with your gardening skills. Instead, it's simply the weather. Tomatoes rely on successful pollination to produce fruit, and that process becomes difficult when temperatures climb too high. During periods of intense heat, especially when daytime temperatures consistently approach or exceed 90 degrees Fahrenheit and nights remain unusually warm, tomato pollen can lose its viability. Without viable pollen, flowers cannot complete the pollination process. Since the plant recognizes that fruit development is impossible under those conditions, it sheds the flowers to conserve energy. This condition is commonly known as blossom drop. Understanding blossom drop is incredibly important because it prevents unnecessary panic. Many gardeners respond by feeding plants heavily, thinking they need more nutrients. In reality, extra fertilizer often makes the situation worse by encouraging additional leafy growth rather than solving the temperature problem. The real solution is helping the plant cope with heat stress while waiting for conditions to improve. One of the most effective strategies is providing afternoon shade. A lightweight shade cloth can reduce temperatures around the plant without blocking all sunlight. The goal isn't to keep tomatoes in the dark. It's simply to reduce the intensity of the hottest afternoon sun. Even a modest reduction in heat stress can improve flower retention and overall plant health. Maintaining consistent soil moisture is equally important. A heat-stressed plant that also experiences drought stress has an even harder time producing fruit successfully. Long-term planning can help as well. If you live in a region known for extremely hot summers, consider choosing heat-tolerant tomato varieties next season. Plant breeders have developed varieties specifically designed to continue setting fruit during conditions that cause traditional varieties to stop producing. These heat-set tomatoes can make a remarkable difference in challenging climates where summer temperatures remain high for extended periods. The most important thing to remember about blossom drop is that it is often temporary. As temperatures moderate and nights become cooler, healthy plants usually resume normal flower production and fruit set. In many cases, patience is far more effective than any fertilizer or garden product. Understanding what's happening allows you to respond calmly instead of making changes that may actually create new problems. So let's bring everything together. These 5 mistakes may seem different on the surface, but they all connect to the same goal: creating a stable environment where tomato plants can thrive. Consistent deep watering protects fruit and root health. Balanced fertilization encourages production instead of excessive foliage. Proper watering techniques reduce disease pressure. Smart pruning improves airflow without sacrificing protection. And understanding heat stress helps you avoid unnecessary worry when summer temperatures rise. Master these fundamentals, and June transforms from the most challenging month of the season into the foundation of your success. The actions you take now determine what your garden looks like in August. A few simple adjustments today can mean the difference between struggling plants and baskets overflowing with ripe, flavorful tomatoes later in the summer. Gardening has never been about perfection. Every gardener makes mistakes. Every gardener loses plants from time to time. What matters is learning why those problems happen and making small improvements each season. The wonderful thing about tomatoes is that they reward attention, patience, and consistency. Give them the right conditions, and they'll often exceed your expectations. As you head back out to your garden, take a fresh look at your plants. Check your watering habits. Evaluate your fertilizer routine. Inspect airflow around the foliage. Consider how the summer heat is affecting flower production. Sometimes the smallest adjustments produce the biggest results. And if you avoid these 5 common June mistakes, you'll give your tomatoes their best chance yet to deliver the abundant harvest every gardener hopes for. Thank you for spending time with me today, and I'll see you in the next garden guide.